As the site of both personal and national tragedy, it's no wonder that the remains of Nottingham Castle are among England's most haunted places. The original castle, which has been destroyed twice, all that remains are part of its gatehouse, its foundation, and a network of tunnels that cut their way through the sandstone bluff upon which the castle was built. No living person has resided in the ruins for centuries, but it's a different matter for the dead. Edward I died in 1307, leaving the English crown in the possession of his son, Edward II. Almost immediately, Edward set in motion the forces that would topple him from power. The new king foolishly alienated the barons. They were crucial to replenishing the royal coffers. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That had been depleted by his father's invasion of Scotland. The barons, in turn, imposed their will through an ordinance that obliged Edward II to maintain laws chosen by them. Robert the Bruce's decisive victory over Edward's troops in 1314 further eroded any support or confidence Edward might have had once before. But just as it appeared that Edward was at his weakest, he struck back. The barons were led by Thomas of Lancaster. By 1315, he had effective control of the country, but he proved far less able when asked to wield power. He was incompetent and lazy, content to rely on existing laws to check Edward. It was a short-sighted mistake that allowed Edward to march against his cousin in 1322. It resulted in the defeat of Lancaster at Boroughbridge. Lancaster and his supporters were executed. It appeared that Edward II had recaptured control. Edward could see no threat. He should have thought again. His queen, Isabella, had long ago decided that Edward was not the stuff of kings. She considered him weak-willed, ignorant, and corrupt. It was said that his alleged homosexuality left her feeling alienated and alone. Isabella's meeting with Roger Mortimer was more than just a simple twist of fate. He appreciated Isabella for the woman she was, and he had even attempted to seize the throne of England in 1322. The two came together in France, where Isabella was working as an envoy to her brother, French King Charles IV, and where Mortimer had been exiled after his failure to wrest the crown from Edward. Isabella fell in love, and they began plotting to overthrow her husband. With German and Dutch mercenaries, the conspirators landed in England in 1326. They began attacking countryside, capturing those nobles that were still loyal to the crown. Edward II, he was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle. While no one knows exactly what happened, Edward died the most grisly of deaths there, probably at Mortimer's request. Isabella's son, Edward, took up the crown, but his mother and lover had all its power. Mortimer's ambitions were boundless. It was clear to all that his eye was fixed firmly on the crown, and all who stood between him and the monarchy was young Edward. Edward III was a puppet, and it was a role that he would soon tire of playing. In 1330, Isabella and Mortimer were staying at Nottingham Castle when Edward decided to act. Accompanied by a hand-picked troop of soldiers, Edward gained access to the castle through the tunnels running through its sandstone foundation. Edward captured Mortimer in the bedroom. He then placed his father's murderer in cuffs, while Isabella, his mother, watched helplessly. As Edward led Mortimer away, Isabella is believed to have said, "Fair son, have pity on the gentle Mortimer." Edward did not listen. Mortimer was executed a month later for treason. Like many before him, he was hanged, then drawn and quartered. His remains were left to rot on Tyburn Gate. But something of the traitor survived. He still returns to Nottingham Castle, where he haunts the passageways beneath what is now called Mortimer's Hole. His capture proved more than he could bear. He guards the tunnel now, forever trying to foil his captors. Isabella, in the meantime, spent the rest of her life confined to Castle Rising in Norfolk. The woman known as the She-Wolf of France died there in 1358, alone, insane, and hysterical. Centuries later, just after World War I, American soldiers were staying at the Jerusalem Inn, located next to Nottingham Castle. One evening, the soldiers were surprised. The screams of a French woman filled the air. They heard the same phrase uttered again and again, its repetition further entrenching the words in memory. An inn worker was asked to translate what they had heard and to offer an explanation for what had happened. The soldiers were told that they had heard the pleas of Queen Isabella asking Edward III to have pity on gentle Mortimer. The soldiers had been witness to what many before and many since have experienced: Isabella's ghostly cries from the night. Hers were not the only cries heard at Nottingham Castle. Edward II was not the only monarch to stir resentment towards the crown. Even earlier in the 13th century, King John had lost possessions in Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and parts of Poitou to France. His reputation in tatters, he resolved to restore his legacy. He started to intensify his efforts. The escalation in war meant escalation in cost. For the barons who bore the brunt of John's increased taxes, the situation became unbearable. They acted, but failed, in an attempt to remove John from the throne. The king's wrath was boundless. In retaliation, he took 28 sons of traitorous Welsh noblemen and had them held captive in Nottingham Castle. He kept his hostages alive for a little while before they were led up to the castle's ramparts and hung for the sins of their fathers. To this day, their screams for mercy can still be heard on ramparts. Those living around the castle reported for years that the ghosts of these boys would appear in their homes, lost and confused. Although Nottingham Castle no longer serves as an official royal residence, for a select few it remains home. Their presence is a lasting reminder of how power can pervert the human soul.